Hey guys, Trail Chasers here today. I've had my option for about a month and I figured now would be the optimal time to give a little short-term review for you. My option has had a few little alterations and changes to it, mainly a new bar that's a little bit wider and the Fox factory suspension, which is, yes, a sizable upgrade. I had a decent amount of time on the stock RockShox suspension, however, and I have to say it actually still feels just as good as the Fox. It doesn't have the Kashima code or the Fox name brand to it, but I think it does just as well, to be perfectly honest. The main reason I put that Fox stuff on was because it was custom tuned for me and it has the Talus, so it makes it a little bit easier to climb. But all that aside, I have put probably around 500 miles on the bike by now. I have ridden it pretty much every single day, just to get those miles on it. After school, I just rode through my local watershed trails and stuff. And I've noticed a few things about the handling that I like, some that I don't. And I've noticed things about the suspension that I like and don't. And I've also just noticed general thoughts and concerns, but mostly positives with this bike. So let's get into that. For starters, I think it handles speed very well. It's longer since it's single pivot. They had to make the chainstays longer. It's got a slackened head angle. It's got the low bottom bracket. So when you do get moving, it really does feel quick. It feels like it's got a little bit more in the tank than 130 travel with the debonair in the rear, so it feels almost like a 150, 140 bike. That may just be me running a little bit higher shock pressure than most people usually do. I run about 20% sag in the rear shock. Most people are run around 30, 35. Other than that, I noticed the bike has a lot of pop off the jumps. It really likes to get airborne. If you're the kind of person that wants to get air, throw some shapes, it's a great bike for that. It's really easy to jump. It's been very fun to jump. The bike is not the most flickable in the corners, though. Mainly due to that long wheelbase, like I said before. Sometimes at lower speeds it can be a bit of a handful to handle because the front wheel does kind of like to flop around with the slack head angle. But I think it's a good balance, and overall the handling is more focused on allowing you to crank it up the hill and then just really let it fly on the downs, which is what I like to use my bikes for. Moving on, other than that, you'll notice that the wheels on it are the new wheels, which are so much better than the old Diamondback wheels. These have been pretty stiff. I've tried to beat the crap out of them. There's not really any dents in them. There's one, I believe, a tiny dent in it from when I really was pushing it hard and slammed against a rock over an anacortes. But other than that, the wheels have held up just fine. They've been stiff, and the whole frame package is actually a lot stiffer thanks to the little support gusset that I've talked about in previous videos. If you don't know what that is, you should go back to my other videos and check it out as far as the first option videos and my initial responses on it. So within those 500 miles, I've had a lot of different chances to try it at different places, from smooth, flowy single track with lots of berms and jumps to really chunky, natural stuff up in Anacortes, and it's really gotten me around, and it hasn't complained in doing so. It's been a really, really good bike as far as just hopping on it, not really having to worry about much, because it is a very simple bike as a single pivot. One thing, however, that is not the best, which isn't necessarily as apparent with the Atros, is it does have some pedal bob to it. Now, the reason it's not as much of an issue with the Atros is because obviously the Atros has less travel. When you do start adding more travel to it, I do notice some more pedal bob, and it does have some pedal kickback to it. Now, when you do throw it into the smallest cog, which is what I usually descend in, you don't necessarily feel the pedal kickback as much, but it is still there, and it can feel sometimes as if the bike does kick a little bit more than I like. It's not necessarily going to make it feel sketchy, and I certainly don't usually notice it when I'm descending, but sometimes you do feel that pedal kickback a bit. I've had some questions in the past as to whether their whole single pivot layout actually works, because some people thought that it didn't soak up every small bump on the trail, and to be perfectly honest, that's not what suspension on mountain bikes is designed for. It's designed to keep the rear wheel on the ground, not necessarily to take all the chunk out of the ground for you. To keep things even, I ride a Commensal Meta AMV3 as well. I also ride a Norco A-Line downhill bike, and it feels just as supple as the other two. It doesn't necessarily have the sophistication of the linkages, but when it comes to just pointing it down the hill and going, the linkage does work and it works out fairly well. It's not the most progressive setup, but it is a good setup. I also think the inclusion of 180 rotors on this bike was a smart choice, being that it is more aggressive than the Atros. Most people who are riding this bike are looking to do longer, rowdier descents, where it is needed, and I've definitely noticed it on longer runs. The brakes do hold up better than the Atros Comp or the Atros Base. One thing, however, that I am not a huge fan of is that the front brake is a 2-piston. I'd personally fit a 4-pot brake on there, just because over time it'll perform a little bit better, but that's an upgrade you can do later, and I can't really complain too much about not having a 4-piston at this price point. Speaking of price point, this is where it can kind of get a little bit tricky. This bike has an MSRP of $2,000, but you'll find it from usually around $1,500 to $1,800 on my browsing. Now, for that same price, you can look into the common sal bikes like I ride as well. But the one thing that the common sal bikes do not have that these Diamondback bikes do is the local support. I guarantee you won't be able to walk into a bike shop and ask for a common sal hanger or a specific common sal part, and they may not necessarily have it because common sal is a direct sales brand, so you don't necessarily have as much support from your local bike shop. Whereas with Diamondback, you can get them at local bike shops. They are supported. They have a local company here in Washington, actually, that's where they're based. So that's one of the reasons why they're more expensive than a direct sales brand. So do I think the price is worth it? I think so. I think it's warranted because it performs extremely well. If you watch the first impressions, we both agreed that the bike performs like a $3,000 or a $4,000 bike, and I still stand by that opinion. I think the bike's a great value as a trail bike. It gets you out on the trails. It gets you all the modern features with no excess crap like boost or just, it doesn't give you a lot to worry about. It's a low maintenance bike that's great for beginners and really just gets you out on the trails without spending all your money on bikes, so you can save money for your helmet or a lift ticket even. I honestly would feel okay with taking this to a bike park with a lift, maybe once in a while. It feels okay for that. Here in Washington, some of the lifts it may not be able to do, and I'll be perfectly honest, I would not feel comfortable on certain lifts on this bike, but for the most part, I'd feel comfortable bombing down just about any trail on this as much as I like to bomb down on my 200 or my 150 bike. Now, this is a shorter travel trail bike, so it's not as forgiving as some of the longer travel counterparts out there, but I think as far as if you know what you're doing on a bike, you can get a ton of speed out of this thing, and it will go very fast for you. So in the end, I think it's a good bike with a good value that'll get you on the trails, and it's very simple, so it's not going to complain. And it's just an overall solid value and a solid bike that you can just go out, have fun on, and not think about. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you guys on the trails later. Trail Chasers is out. Bye-bye.